Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Fletcher?
Here.
Councilman Rawls?
Here.
Councilman Shelley? Councilman Shelley? Councilwoman Bailey?
Here.
Councilwoman Avila? Councilwoman Avila?
Here.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers?
Present and accounted for.
Mayor Losner?
I'm here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, tab 1, car number 2996. Madam Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is our 5th public meeting on the budget. There was a budget workshop in July, followed by a second budget workshop on August 11th, at which time staff brought a balanced budget to Council, which had no reduction in service, no layoffs, and no overall increase to the tax rate. This could not have been accomplished without $1.8 million in cuts and reductions from the general fund budget. Subsequently, at the first budget hearing on September 8th, Council directed staff to come back with an increase to the millage rate to cover the cost of 10 police officers and the body camera program. At the September 23rd final budget hearing, the Council approved a balanced budget with a millage rate increase only to cover the .2480 for the reallocation of the library tax, but no increase for the body camera program or more police officers. Council voted to set aside certain funds in the fiscal year 2021 budget to be used for public safety. Council also directed that staff come back with more information with regard to the additional police officers and the body camera program. This is the purpose of today's workshop. During and since the September 23rd meeting, a number of budget-cutting measures have been suggested, including eliminating positions, reducing services, and further cutting the general fund budget, a measure that would likely result in layoffs. Our goal has always been to bring a balanced budget without cutting services or laying off staff, especially during this pandemic. As I already mentioned, we were able to balance this budget by previously reducing $1.8 million. Now that we have an approved balanced budget, it does not mean we will stop finding ways to cut costs and save money during fiscal year 2021. Staff will also look for other sources of revenue. Some of the concerns that were raised during the September 23rd discussion regarding police officers and cameras include use of all available forfeiture funds, use of Speedway recurring revenue, the possibility of a 3-year contract, the potential for a deferred payment, whether and when grants would be available, whether the residents of Homestead want body cameras, the importance of the need of hiring more police officers before implementing a body camera program. Staff has come up with a plan to address many of these concerns and to implement the body camera program and hire 3 to 4 police officers now without raising taxes. With regard to the body camera program, Axon has advised that they do not offer 3-year agreements. Axon is open to a deferred payment plan wherein the city pays 8% in the first year with equally divided payments for the remaining years. This would amount to a payment of approximately $112,000 in year 1. The $112,000 plus the $50,000 one-time build-out costs could be funded with forfeiture dollars, leaving the forfeiture fund with $177,000. Axon may also be open to a non-appropriation clause, under which the city could opt out after year 1 if the program was not funded. Any agreement that the city has with Axon will have to come back to council for approval. The recurring cost of 2 additional sworn officers at approximately $344,000 to manage the program could be funded with the Speedway recurring revenue. This part of the plan requires using the funds already set aside by council for public safety. With regard to additional police officers, the cost to hire 3 to 4 additional police officers without raising taxes could be accomplished as follows. City council budgets cut for a total of an additional $49,000. PD overtime cut budget by another $101,000. This total is $150,000, covers the cost of 1 police officer. And we could also transfer costs to run the Seminole Theater from the general fund, Parks and Rec, to the CRA. The cultural arts section of the CRA plan includes the Town Hall Museum, already funded by the CRA, and the Seminole Theater. This frees up approximately $450,000 in the general fund to cover the cost of 2 to 3 additional police officers without a tax increase. We are here to answer any further questions, and also present is the Axon representative. At this time, we ask for direction from council, and we will proceed as you determine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager, and thank you to your staff for the quick turnaround from our meeting last week to land us here this afternoon. And with that, I will open it up to questions or comments from council.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilman Fletcher.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the city staff for going and looking very hardly at the budget and finding these additional offsets. It's my opinion. I know it's not really a motion in this particular arena, but my consensus is to move forward with the staff's recommendations. Again, like I said, I'm going to have to step off the call here shortly, but I don't believe there's a vote on this at this time, correct? This is just we tell them to move forward as a general consensus.
That's my understanding, Councilman, yes, that this will be by formal, I guess, budget amendment at a council meeting in the future.
Okay, so I'm in favor, and I appreciate the staff's hard work and looking forward to implementing these changes as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Next.
Mayor, I guess I'll go.
Sure, Councilman Roth. Good afternoon. Long time.
Thank you. Yeah. That was read pretty quickly, and in some of the meetings prior to this one with staff, there seems to be shortfalls in the future. Now, the monies that were from the Seminole were new to me. I don't remember talking about that. Hey, can you explain, even with the deferrals, that what's it going to look like next year if there's no forfeiture money, so that we can be, fiscally responsible and not say we can do this year, and then next year we have to opt out because there's no funds that are going to be reoccurring for the body camera program. My whole premise is that if we're going to do the body camera program, it needs to be in place for a long period of time, not just a 1-year shot. And I'm not sure if that sends a good signal out there that we may not have the money for it next year. So can we look forward a little bit to see where we are with the body camera program? And when I speak of the program, I speak of all the costs that are associated with that: the cameras, the data capturing, the storage, the additional police officers and staff that run that particular program. Please, thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Councilman Roth. As you stated, the forfeiture funds are not guaranteed for next year. And in terms of the recurring funds, we would have recurring dollars from the Speedway, which would cover the cost of the personnel. The challenge that we would have is where we would find the money for the extra equipment. And we may well have forfeiture money, but as you know, that's not guaranteed. We may be able to get grant money. As you know, that's not guaranteed. So it is something that we have to consider. And we'd like to think that fiscally the city will be in much better shape a year from now than it has been throughout this COVID pandemic.
So, I mean, we're all interested in getting the cameras in that program, but I'm not clear yet that we have the monies to do this and add police officers. Everybody's making sacrifices, but it just seems to me we're kind of making some choices and some decisions on some what ifs. What if the city's in better shape next year? What if the city's not in better shape next year? What if another pandemic comes around? What if we get the country shut back down again? And we've brought in this program, we've invested in it, and we just don't have the money to pay for it now. And the additional police officers, and to continue the services that we already offer to to the citizens in the city. And, we talked about the COLA. And, there's employees that would enjoy a COLA too, and it just seems like we're shortchanging ourselves right now, and trying to force this matter into our budget where we don't really seem to have the room for it. Oh, want it. There's no question. It's just a matter of being fiscally and financially responsible to the citizens of the city. So we don't come back here and say, boy, that increase that we tried to get through last year, well, we had to double this year to cover all of our expenses. And I just don't think that to me, that this just doesn't seem fair. So I'll sit back and listen for some more comments, Mayor. I appreciate the time, and I think we still have some thoughts to get through this whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Roth.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I wanted to hear more about the pilot program. Does Axon have any information on the pilot program that was discussed or brought up in the previous meetings?
Councilman, I'm not sure what the pilot program is. PD is on, Captain is on, or is there talk of a pilot program?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and staff, council. Pilot program is merely just a test program, as if we were going to test different types of cameras, whether it be Axon or another company, several companies. We've done that in a different way. Rather than bringing in cameras just to test, we already decided, based upon the product, the reliability of getting knowledge gained through other departments, we made a decision on what we would select. So a pilot program would say you're only going to use, get 5 cameras from one manufacturer and try that out, see how it works. And you get another 5 cameras from another manufacturer, try that out and see how that works. Meanwhile, we have other individuals in the department that don't have a camera. So that's really for a testing phase when you're trying to select a product. And I think we put it forth that this is the product that we want to go with, which is Axon.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Thank you. I think what I was trying to determine was whether or not we could roll out the camera selection on a pilot program basis, but what I'm hearing is that it's more of a mismatch of different products to try out and to then make a determination. So I don't think that's going to work for trying to kind of moderate the program or phase in the program. Am I understanding correctly, Captain?
So I think what you're really referring to is if we did a partial deployment and did it in phases, where say you did uniform patrol and then you moved it on to other units within the department. Again, you run into a problem when you do a partial deployment, and guaranteed if we did have a incident happen, they're going to, somebody's going to point the finger and say, well, how come they didn't have to camera? In reality, yeah, we are doing a partial deployment, but you're going to really have some shortcomings. Also, when we have a partial deployment, the detectives that need to access it through licensing software and things like that, say if you just do uniform patrol and you don't pay for the licensing for the software, the detectives who have to follow up on all these cases won't have access to that environment because we didn't purchase. We're only doing a partial deployment, so we didn't purchase the necessary licensing for the detectives to do access to videos for their follow-up investigation.
Thank you, Captain.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anything further at the moment?
At the moment, no. I'd like to hear some more. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Council members?
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Hi.
Hello there. Sorry. I was getting some notes straight. So just to clarify a little bit, again, I would also like to thank staff for the very quick turnaround and my colleagues for getting together again so soon. As far as the cuts from the council budget, I'm assuming that's 7,000 each?
That's correct.
Okay. And as far as the CRA, the 450,000 is for what we were using to buy the land acquisition, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So it was just a matter of moving a few things around so that the Seminole fell within the CRA and not the general fund.
That's correct.
I'm almost understanding this.
That's correct.
I don't know about that. No. You know, Councilman Roth, I hear you, and I know that it is not, I understand the hesitation to use the forfeiture funds. I think we're on a really, really good path here. I know that it takes somebody.
Councilwoman, you're breaking. I think someone else needs to mute.
Everybody else needs to mute themselves.
Can you hear me now?
I think it's CD.
Yep.
You need to
He
mute.
needs to turn off his microphone, I think.
No. No, sorry. My internet has also been terrible today. So what I was saying is I think that we're on a really good path with that. I would like to see as many officers as possible. But if it would make everyone feel more comfortable that we only add 2 instead of 3 additional for this year, if we're deferring the payment plan for a year, then we'll be okay for next year when that first payment comes around.
At this point of time, what we were suggesting to hire an additional 4 police officers, not 2 or 3.
Okay, sorry. So 3 instead of 4. All right. So 2 from CRA and 1 from the Speedway. Two officers from the Speedway Fund. Correct?
No. I would so if everybody can mute their mics, that would be good. I'm gonna, and Councilman Roth suggested that it was read through pretty quickly, but if we separate the body camera program right now and get additional police officers for a moment, the body camera program, the entire program, including the 2 police officers, would be paid for with some of the forfeiture money plus the Speedway money. So those 2 police officers are paid for with that recurring revenue from the Speedway. And that's the money that you guys put aside for public safety. That uses up that money. So the additional 3 to 4 police officers after those 2 police officers would come by the council cuts, the PD overtime cut, that's 1 police officer, and then moving the Seminole Theater to the CRA, that frees up approximately $450,000 to the general fund, which would cover the cost of 2 to 3 more police officers. So total, all in, 3 to 4 plus 2, we're looking at 6 police officers. Does that make sense?
Yes, it did. So the only thing that we are not counting on is the forfeiture funds, correct?
We cannot just funds as a and right now I think it's $339,000 total forfeiture. If we go through with this plan, there would be $177,000 left in forfeiture funds now.
Okay. Okay, I'll rest for now and listen to some more comments. Thank you.
Let me interject here real quick, so as the rest of you talk and we all speak again, we've got the same numbers to compare. So year 1, I guess, has been calculated with the reduced installment for the first year. So can you tell me what the body cam equipment would cost in years 2 through 5?
$329,564.48.
That's pretty close. Are you sure? That's not just, yeah, okay. So, just to have that perspective, in year, and that's plus, and then add in the cost of the 2 new officers.
That's
More or
correct.
less.
Yeah.
More or less is another
344.
Okay.
So that's a total of 674.
So, 679, yeah. So what we're looking at, though, is in year 2, only having 171 of the 329 that we need for the equipment. And then if we work under the proposition that forfeiture will be depleted, we'll have to find that 329 and change in years 3 through 5.
That's correct, Mayor. And also, obviously, any opportunity for grants that we can go after, we'll be going after very aggressively.
Right, because, my concern is forfeiture is not guaranteed, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the numbers we've had before us through the budget process shows a continual and significant decline in annual revenues with respect to forfeiture monies. So, kind of to touch on what Councilman Roth said, maybe we've got it this year and next year, but where do we go from there? I just want us to be all really clear as to the dollars we sit here and face today. But not only that, as to the additional officers, these council and other cuts that we're looking at this year are not just a one-time Band-Aid. These are going to have to be ongoing policy and philosophy changes within the budget from here on out to pay for those police officers. And I understand that, we all understand that over sometime in the next 5 years, we should have a significant increase in our tax base, but these cuts and this moving around of money is not a 1-year or 2-year process. And for me, it opens the door of really, at some point in this coming year, sitting down and having that priority and philosophical conversation about our priorities and setting the example for future councils. So, but my main purpose of interjecting here was just to clarify those numbers that the first couple of years we seem to be okay, but after that all bets are off as to funding for dedicated funding for the body cam system.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilors? Yes, Councilman Fletcher. Is that you, Councilman Fletcher?
Yes, I have to step off for another meeting. I'll try and call back in as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it.
Mayor, if I may?
Sure, Councilman Roth.
Thank you. I'm still unclear on where we found $450,000 from a settlement fund. Giving it to, I'm assuming that it would say we're giving it to the CRA to fund something. Can somebody clear that up for me?
I'm happy to clear that up for you, Councilman. If you remember, when we talked about the CRA budget, there was a line item for $900,000 for land acquisition. Now, because the millage did not increase, that number will decrease. But assuming there's, do you know the number? Well, assuming there's 600 and something thousand, there's probably 600 and something $1,000 in that line item in the CRA budget. So in the CRA plan, there's a section called Cultural Arts. And under Cultural Arts is listed the Town Hall Museum, which is already funded by the CRA, and the Seminole Theater. So what we're suggesting, a way to hire more police officers, would be move the funding of the Seminole Theater out of the general fund into the CRA. And the money would come from the land acquisition line. So instead of $650,000 or whatever it is, we would take about $450 out, and there'd be $200 left in land acquisition. And that frees up in the general fund that money, and that's where you would be able to pay for 2 to 3 more police officers.
And will that money be there year 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yes, as the mayor pointed out, these cuts and these changes would be going forward as well.
And Councilman Roth, I might, and I think what I'm also reading and hearing is that we're going to not only reduce the land acquisition budget for this year and presumably future years, but rather than having the general fund spend $467,000 on the Seminole Theater, as is on page 43 of our budget book, that expense would be transferred in full to the CRA. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So really, we're talking almost $1 million, or $950 and change, when we reduce the land acquisition budget and shift the burden from the general fund to the CRA budget.
No.
To the Seminole Theater.
No, Mayor. If we consider, and if the number is 465 right now, the general fund, to cover the cost of the operations of the theater, it costs $465,000. So that would simply be paid for out of the CRA, out of that line item. But what it does is then there's $465,000 in the general fund. It's not, you don't add those two together.
Right, okay. We're not spending that 465 out of the general. Okay.
That's exactly right. If depending on what the direction of council is today, if you did go forward with this proposal, then we would be spending that money on the police officers.
But it just never seems that's a good idea. This is what it sounds like to me, that we're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's not usually a good idea. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Is that kind of what's happening?
Councilman Roth, in a manner of speaking, I guess the more politically correct to say it is that we're reallocating budget dollars, but I would tend to agree with you that yes, that's exactly what's happening, at least as to one component of this two-part conversation.
Yeah, well.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a couple of council members who haven't weighed in yet. Is that you, Councilman Shelley?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilman
Yes, it is.
Shelley. Yes.
Sorry, I'm in my car, so the audio is probably not as good as normal. At first, I want to thank staff. Staff, I think you've done a great job of trying to take the direction from us at the council level. I know that we've, looked at multiple ways and had multiple discussions about how to solve some of these problems. And so I thank you, staff, for working hard quickly to come back with some potential solutions for us to discuss that gives us a pathway forward to potentially, resolving or solving some of the issues that we've raised. As far as the actual plan itself, I have a couple of, comments / possible concerns. One being that, when I agreed to reallocate or agreed to allocate certain dollars or earmark certain dollars for future discussion on body cameras and police, the question always was how much of each could we do? And ultimately, my biggest concern always remained in the fact that some of those, specifically the forfeiture funds, were kind of non-recurring. So at the end of the day, at that point, had we gone forward with what was existing as a pot of monies, my concern was I don't know whether or not I would be comfortable allocating or committing to a long-term commitment with non-recurring funds, meaning that the next year we may potentially have to raise taxes or make significant cuts that weren't planned in order to honor our contractual commitment. So, the fact that, you have been able to potentially get them to do an appropriations clause somewhere within the contract, I think for me is a key component. And if that appropriations clause doesn't exist, I'm not likely to support funding in full because I don't think that I could commit non-recurring dollars to something that's going to go on for 5 years. So I think that's critical for me as this thing progresses forward, that the company does, in fact, allow for us to have an appropriation clause in there that'll allow me to have some comfort in potentially moving this forward and starting the program, knowing that if things get worse economically for the city of Homestead because of COVID or any other purpose, that we have a way in which we can not be forced to make additional drastic cuts and or raise taxes to continue the program. So I think that's one of the messages I want to deliver is that, you know, when the contract comes back before us without an appropriation out or an appropriation clause as you described it, I'd be less likely to support it in its current form. The other concern I do have a little bit as well is that I know in order to pay for some of these officers, we're talking about pulling $101,000 out of overtime. And so overtime typically, you know, unless the idea is because we add these officers, it's going to allow us to not have to have the overtime because you have more officers now taking over and the existing officers can actually take the time off, you know, that may help explain for that. But also I know that just like this year, because of COVID, an unexpected condition resulted in a large sum of overtime hours being billed by the police department, ultimately because of the nature of their business and the fact that they're there to provide safety and security for the community. There'll be times where we can't control that cost, where we have no choice but to ultimately put them to work, let them do their job, and have to pay whatever overtime results from that job. And so there's some concerns about balancing the budget long term based on the idea of saving overtime, because I don't know that that's an expense that we can definitely control. So I have some concerns on that aspect as well for I guess, discussion purposes as you guys move forward. And then the only last item I had here too dealt with, as we're looking to add police officers, again, I think that I and the community as a whole, I mean, I think police officers are an important aspect. I think we're understaffed. I think that, you know, for safety and security of our community, you know, we need to find a way to add officers to the force. But I also know that, you know, I've been contacted by other employees in other departments of the city who have raised similar concerns and that they don't have sufficient staff to do their job. And some of them are also, you know, fairly core functions are very core functions to the city and what government is supposed to do for a community. And so I think that as we start talking specifically about officers right now, I think we also have to understand that we are going to get the same requests from other departments who feel they are equally as important in providing services to the city of Homestead. And we're going to have to figure out at that point why we tell them, no, we can't figure out a solution to get them more employees, but we did for the police. You know, and I think that's something we need to be aware of as we move down this pathway, or staff needs to go back to the drawing board as we have further discussions getting into the next budget year on figuring out how do we provide, you know, more monies available for linemen, for solid waste, for some of these departments that are understaffed and barely able to provide the services that we need them to as we continue to grow as a city as well in some other aspects. So those are kind of my comments. I think overall, I mean, I'm supportive of the concept as it gets developed. I commend staff on working hard to try to find these solutions to a very difficult situation. But there are still some concerns that I think we need to flush through as we're putting the final touches on these solutions. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Shelley. Appreciate you joining in from the road today.
Mayor, if I may.
Vice Mayor, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I was driving, so I was waiting until I got to my home in order to be able to weigh in because it was raining and I wanted to be clear. First, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for facilitating a very healthy debate and conversation in our last meeting. I had to abruptly get off the call, but I wanted to thank you for fairly moderating the conversation on September 3rd. I also want to commend staff for the hard work, the sweat equity that you have placed into this budget cycle. I recognize that it has been extremely difficult. This is our 5th hearing to discuss the budget. And I don't want to be disingenuous when I say this, but this is the most I've ever been confused with the direction of this council. But I thank you for your creativity and the work that you've placed into creating a platform for our council to be able to serve the greater good of this community. as I was listening to the conversations as I was driving, there was a quote that came to my mind from Martin Luther King, and it says, you know, sometimes faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the entire staircase. So for me, the conversation began on June 22nd when I discussed the racial equity and access plan in different areas that I feel that this community, the city of Homestead, can work towards in order to bring parity to the African American community that has experienced systemic racism for over 400 years. And one of those areas was police reform and accountability, in addition to mental health and awareness, mentoring, education, home ownership, and things of that sort. All of that has not been lost and has not been abandoned. And I was fully transparent when I talked about police accountability and reform to include body cameras, police officers, as well as looking at our standard operating procedures to determine if any shifts can be made. So I kind of wanted to reshuffle the deck and remind us where we started and why we are here. So with that, I am excited about the plan that you set forth. I understand that there are some concerns about recurring revenue as it relates to the body camera issue, and it piqued my interest when you said that you had a conversation with Axon and they would be, I guess, perhaps amenable to that appropriation clause. So since we have them on the line, I would like to ask them that question. What does that mean that you may be interested? Because it appears as if some of us on this call are interested in moving forward with funding 1 year, and then at the end of the year, if funds aren't available, and I'm sure our city manager will get creative with her team to find the funds, perhaps in reserves, to be able to pay moving forward. But if Axon representative can talk a little bit about the non-appropriation clause and if we're in a great position to be able to leverage that angle.
Captain Dijon, if you could introduce Representative.
Yes, ma'am. We have a Axon representative here, Jeremy Deegan. He's available to give his presentation and answer any questions that they may have. And again, here's Jeremy Deegan.
Well, thank you for being here, Jeremy, and specifically, if you could address the Vice Mayor's question with respect to the non-appropriation.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. It's nice to meet everyone. Just high level on the legal contract. I know Kate has had a chance to review it, same with the PD and finance. There is explicit language about termination for non-appropriation, and that's relatively straightforward. If the city doesn't have the funding for it, the contract is canceled at the end of the first year. And we added language of termination for convenience. So it extends through, again, it's, I think, easier sometimes to cancel for convenience than it is for non-appropriation. But either way, it's a way of passing all of the risk onto Axon, right? Since we've structured the payment schedule so that the first year is 8% of the total contract, but all the hardware deliverables and all the trainings and services are included. It's a way for you to have the opportunity to reevaluate or more or less shift money around to fund years 2 through 5, should you see the value in the program. And Axon, in that same sense, is we're betting on ourselves. We know that the impact of the program will justify a reallocation of budget for it in the following years.
Thank you so much for that. So just to be clear and to amplify what you just said, you said that Axon is willing to take the risk on this if after 1 year the funds are now available in the city of Homestead to move forward with body cameras. You're saying that there's a way for us to get out of the contract should funds not be available.
Yes.
Okay, that is very important information to be able to convey to my colleagues as well as the community. So with my position, I don't see this as a robbing Peter to pay Paul. I see it exactly what it is, and that is reappropriating funds, and it's creative. If you see that there's funding that is in the general fund that was originally paid from CRA that can shift, the Parks and Rec, that can shift to CRA, that's creative. Specifically, if it can be funded from the CRA. And at our last meeting, perhaps I wasn't as articulate as enough. I was sharing that with grants. Oftentimes, if we're not able to receive grants for body cameras, you can go after other grants that can fund areas so that you can shift and then repurpose the money to body cameras. So I think that was amazing that staff came up with that idea to be able to shift that expense to the CRA without completely utilizing all of the money that was earmarked for land acquisition, with some money still being available. So I think with this, we have reached that middle marker, what I've asked all of my colleagues to consider, to meet in the middle. I think we've done that. What I hear, we did not raise taxes. We did not cut services. We are not laying off anyone. We are not utilizing all of our forfeiture funds. We have a reoccurring expense for police officers. We're bringing more police officers. And with these police officers, perhaps cutting down some of that overtime. So now I have a question to Cade, Police Department, whoever can answer this question. With the overtime that was accumulated due to COVID, wasn't there CARES Act funds to be able to reimburse?
I'm going to let Carlos answer that with some detail.
Vice Mayor, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yes. Yeah, the cost incurred for the overtime by the police department for COVID, yes, we are trying to get reimbursement from the CARES Act, but again, it's going to be subject to approval and we have to go through FEMA first. The county's CARE Act project, the way that they're administering it, they feel that that is like of last resort if there's another avenue that we can pursue. So we have to file through FEMA first, wait for them to approve or disapprove or whatever they're going to do, and then we can file the remaining balance, the CARES Act. The CARES Act, the only thing that will cover for the police overtime is probably the 12.5% that normally local municipalities will have to incur anyway, because usually the feds and the states don't cover 100% of the expenditures through FEMA anyway. So again, bottom line, yes, there are sources out there. We are in pursuit of those, but I don't see that happening until sometime in 2021, late 2021.
So, but there is an avenue to be able to recoup those funds. It's not like it's all the time completely on the city's dime.
That's correct.
Right. So I think it's very important that we communicate this to the council. When we raise concerns about police overtime, we need to be able to be transparent and say, hey, there's a funding mechanism to be able to recoup those funds through the CARES Act. So my question to you, Kate, is you and your team came up with this plan to be able to respond to the concerns of all of council, which I believe was the fair approach. How confident do you and your staff feel moving forward with this plan?
We're extremely confident. If the council gives us that direction, we're very confident that we could go forward with it.
If you had any reservations about this, or feel that, you know what, we really can't do this, we're bringing it to you, but because you asked for it, but we're not too crazy about it, would you say that's your position?
Our position was really just to address all of the concerns and to come up with a plan that addressed all the concerns. And we're wholly confident that we did so, and we believe that it's a very viable plan. But again, we're just seeking direction for what the council would like. But without question, we are firm in that we think that this is a solid suggestion.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you for that. And the work you put in, I looked at the budget 1,000 times and I never thought about that funding for CRA and, the Seminole Theater being moved over to CRA. So job well done to your staff. I am confident with moving forward with this. I am even more confident that Axon affirmed that non-appropriation clause is in there because full transparency, Kate, I asked you that question when I spoke to you last evening about that non-appropriation clause because that was a concern for me as well as Councilman Shelley. But I was 90% confident going into the meeting with the plan, but 100% confident now that Axon affirms that there's a potential possibility, that it is a possibility for us to get out of the contract after 1 year. So with that, I'll rest and reserve the opportunity to discuss further.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. Couple questions for staff. When we started the budget discussions, in round numbers, the amount for 10 officers was put out there at just under $1.6 million. So let's call it $160,000 a year per officer to hire, to pay, to train with full equipment. But your memo from, I guess, today puts it at 149 an officer. Can we narrow that down here? Because when you let's say the savings by reallocating the cost of Seminole Theater from the general fund to the CRA land acquisition budget, 450 divided by 3 comes out to about $150,000 an officer. Is that a better number than the more or less 160 that was put out there early in the process?
Mayor, can you hear me?
I can, Carlos, yes.
The latest information that we provided to you was that each police officer with equipment and all would be $150,609. So we've been saying approximately $150,000.
151, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I had in my mind from the early discussions that rounding it up, it was about 160 an officer. All right.
Give it back to you.
I guess to go forward, obviously, I'm going to need our attorneys to read that proposed language and give me some comfort that there are truly good and clear pathways to terminating in the future for whichever reason, whether it be non-convenience or non-appropriation. But
Mayor, we would get that. We would have to bring it back to you for review, and obviously our attorneys would have it before it came back to council. But we could not go forward without council approval on the contract.
Right. Yeah. We're talking in theory here and philosophy to go forward, but that's going to make a big difference in my decision. But let's not lose sight of the fact that if a year from now or 2 years from now we find ourselves in a financially tough situation and can elect to terminate the camera system, we are still going to be on the hook for the ongoing costs of those 2 officers. It would be inconceivable to me that we would ever reduce the number of officers in our police department once they're added. So that's an important component not to lose sight of. We wouldn't be relieving ourselves of the whole $380,000, we'd be relieving ourselves of the 329, but we would still have the ongoing expense of those 2 new officers that were hired or brought from within and then their positions replaced, however that may work out. So we need to be mindful of that. Is the Axiom representative still on with us?
Yes, sir, he's right here.
Thank you. One of the really tough impediments to my review of the body camera systems is the heavy administrative cost. We're talking about 2 mid to high level police officers plus 1 clerical staff. So let me ask you, is that what you recommend, or was that determined independently by our police department upon review of your system? Help me understand the ins and outs of that huge payroll hit that comes with the acquisition of a body camera system.
Sure. And I think that recommendation came from conversations that command staff had with other agencies in terms of best practice. What this proposal includes is using technology and automation to minimize the personnel and the lift from members of the department. So there are all different functions and features native to our program that are there to relieve that workload, whether it be with redaction or training or policy review. Without the features of this program, it could be 5 to 10 people that would be needed to manage the program.
Okay, appreciate that. So really, is it, assure me that these 3 people are going to be working, all 3 of them, full-time, every day to operate and maintain this system?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we made that decision on the amount of manpower based upon our discussions with other agencies that whether they're using Axon or not, but mostly is with agencies that are using Axon. Some had 1 person that was doing it, and they're so inundated, they're begging for help. Another agency I discussed before, the county, they have a lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 8 civilians that are doing it. So they still, it's a lot of work that has to be done. So some of the work that's being done on a daily basis is, number 1, responding to public records requests. Along with those public records requests have to do with redactions, which the software that is there is going to make it easier, but it's still a continuous ongoing effort. The other part of it is just helping review for quality control. If we noticed that there was a case pulled and a report written, but we can't find a video, we have to determine why there wasn't no video taken on that, for that particular incident. So that there would be quality control involved in it. There would be the redaction. It would be assuring that if there's additional training needed or maybe even policy change, because a lot of the other agencies, what they discussed is we developed our policy, but in turn, what we're going to have to do is we're going to turn around and the policy is going to be fluid because they're going to find out, well, this works for our department, it worked for another department, but it doesn't work for us. So they're going to constantly, as this evolves, they're going to have to develop policy. Over time, over a period of time, as we get very proficient in this, yeah, could there be a change where we need more people or less people to run it? That remains to be seen. But I think with the current situation where there's tons and tons of public records requests, attorneys requesting things on cases and things like that, there is going to be constant movement where they're going to be busy full time.
All right, thank you. Because I have to admit that was a real piece of sticker shock for me to see the level of payroll that it would take to add this system. And look, we've all pledged to the public to have this system. Then the question becomes at what cost and how do we bear that cost? I mean, I think from what I've seen, online and the social media and the phone calls and emails and social media monitoring that I've had, is that overwhelmingly those who spoke out are all for additional officers. They support the concept of body cameras, but don't support the concept of increasing the tax rate. So we've met one of the three prongs of those directives at this point, but it's very important to me to have a really good understanding of what those escape clauses might be. You know, I'd be willing to join in at this point with some council direction to staff to take this to the next level. Certainly, I join with Councilman Shelley and Councilman Roth and anyone else who may have expressed these concerns that I don't want to go down the road of non-recurring revenues and pools of money that are drying up to make this happen. I want to be confident that it doesn't become a financial drain if we have unforeseen circumstances, that we're not saddled with even tougher decisions and balancing of the priorities. I mean, the phrase that keeps coming to mind for me, that those of us that had to take at least one economics class in college, the phrase guns or butter, you know, that's kind of what we're deciding here. Is our economy going to be producing guns or butter, or how do we do both? That's really how I see the decision. And touching on a couple of my comments from earlier is that you know, philosophically, I don't know that the public really understands that the city subsidizes the Seminole Theater to the tune of $465,000 a year. We've all made our sacrifices, and we've really sharpened our pencils on this budget. And, you know, I want to lay down the marker that when we start the budget process next year, that group is going to really need to justify their expenses and help carry the freight on that as well. Vice Mayor, you talked earlier about, you know, the racial justice and parity conversations that we've had, and I'm on board with those. And the CRA is an integral part of implementing those reforms. And I don't want to shortchange the CRA. Everybody's going to have to put their sweat equity and skin in the game. So, you know, it's not just the Seminole Theater. I made other suggestions, and I'll just say generally, other suggestions to the manager, and I'll just say generally to my colleagues that just because something is in the budget doesn't mean we need to spend it. I think that more than one of you at our last budget meeting even talked in terms of reducing committee allocations, and I think that, you know, when we go back to my analogy of looking for coins in the couch cushions, that is a conversation that at some point should not be off the table. Again, for me, it's a budget philosophy and priority that we're all going to have to address. But again, I would be willing to join in to move this to the next level and get some legal advice as to I guess limiting our exposure, or how we limit our exposure to being stuck with a contract for a recurring expense when those non-recurring items that we're looking to now may be depleted. Well, thank you all. Anything further from council?
Thank you, Mayor. If I may?
Sure.
I just have one quick question. And I agree with you that the CRA is a very integral component to the racial equity and access. I completely agree with you in that. With the cuts from our committees, I'm willing to have those conversations. I have another question for Axon representative. At our last meeting, it was referenced that the cameras are on 24 hours, and when an officer goes into someone's home, the cameras are still on. well, I think they should have been on when they went in Breonna Taylor's home, but that's beside the point. Can you just talk a little bit about the policy as it relates to the recording, and is it 24 hours?
Well, as far as, I don't know who referenced that the cameras are on 24 hours. They're not. They are recording constantly on a 30-second loop, where it's constantly recording for 30 seconds, and then it overwrites that. Then once it's triggered, either manually by the officer pressing the button to turn on the camera, like he received a call or he's getting out to engage with a citizen to talk with him, he's going to push it and talk. And then there's signals for the holster. If you draw a weapon or you pull your taser, it's going to automatically turn that camera on. Also, any other cameras that are within 50 feet of that officer. Other officers that have cameras, it'll turn off. But I will let the Axon representative clear that up a little bit more so there's no confusion on it.
Yes, ma'am. So from a high level, the camera is constantly in a buffering mode. So it's recording and rewriting over itself. And then there are all different ways to activate a recording. So like Captain said, it can be from drawing your firearm or arming your taser, a manual activation, or anything within your vehicle, turning your lights on or pulling a gun, something like that will all start the recording. Now, in regards to whether or not the camera will be on if you enter someone's home on a domestic call, that's got to be a policy decision from the agency. We certainly give you the option to customize all of that, but I think that's a bigger discussion when you develop your SOP.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I've read several SOPs from municipalities in Miami-Dade County that has body-worn cameras, and that is referenced. So if we move forward with this, I'm sure our police department will have, some very serious conversations that relates to recording once you enter into someone's home, because I know that was a concern based on our last meeting from some of my colleagues. My final question is, I know grants was a concern, and if we move forward with this, then we potentially foreclose on the opportunity to obtain grants. Based on your experience with, I believe, nationwide, is it over 70,000 agencies that you have they been able to receive grants for body cameras, or are you aware of any grants that the city can apply for body cameras? Because if moving forward we go with it, if the council agrees, I would love to be a part of a delegation with staff to really be aggressive to find grants to help fund it. So what is your experience as it relates to grants?
Yes, that's a good question. Before I answer that, I just want to clear up the math real quick. So the United States has about 18,000 law enforcement agencies. A little over half of them have a body cam program, and Axon has about 80% of those agencies on our platform. So the number of our customers domestically is closer to 7,500. Maybe 70,000 down the road. We'll have to see. But I would say probably a third of the agencies that I work with use grants, and we actually have a grant assistant team at Axon that can work with the PD and work with the city to help search and obtain that sort of funding. Another strategy that I've discussed with the captain is using grants for different types of technologies to help subsidize the annual budget and free up cap space for this Axon contract. And we can help you with that. We have different seminars, and we have a whole team dedicated to working with law enforcement to help them find federal funds that are available.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that information. That is very helpful. And I would love to hear more information about that and really get involved with obtaining those grants. So thank you so much for sharing that information. And as I close, I'm really comfortable with moving forward to the Axon representative based on the conversation here. What is going to be very important for my colleagues and I is that non-appropriation clause. And if you can take that back to your team and let them know that that was one of our concerns, and we will feel very comfortable moving forward with that in the event that our very capable staff aren't able to find funds moving forward. But I'm being optimistic that we will be able to proceed past year one. I am grateful that we have a plan before us to be able to support the needs or the requests of the entire community, body cameras and police officers. And I don't think we should continue to kick the can, but leap forward in faith and moving forward with the proposed plan that you presented from staff, Kate. So with that, I guess I'd entertain a motion to move forward with the proposal that our city manager presented.
Do we have a second?
I would gladly second. I have one quick question, please.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. I just wanted to thank the Axon representative. And when you're in discussions about the appropriation clause, when is that typically due? A year from the start date? Can you just answer that one moment?
Yes, so we've already submitted our purchasing agreement with that language added from Axon Legal. Typically, it's 1 year from the start of the contract.
Okay, I was asking because there was also about putting it on the ballot. You know, even though I am confident that we will find money in the budget or reallocate some funds, if that date could be extended somewhere to the beginning of December, that would also give us a chance, if for any reason there were issues with the budget, to be able to put that on the ballot and see if the residents were willing to at least put part of the expense for the camera program on the taxes. So I just wanted to put that out there. That is even more peace of mind and an additional option. Oh,
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I will gladly second.
Thank you, Alderman Bailey. Now, for clarity, that's what's going forward is the funding mechanisms that were outlined in the memo to us and announced today for the body cam system that includes the hiring of, or the assignment of 2 sworn officers to that system, together with the hiring of up to 3 new police officers. And personally, until we see some final numbers, I don't want to be locked into 3. I'd like the option to go 2, 3, but if it's 2, it's 2, because we're really adding to, if there's a circumstance such as a hurricane or whatever the case may be, in theory, those who are assigned to the camera system can get out into the streets as well to supplement our forces.
Mayor, I'm just a little confused by what you said. So I think the 2 police officers that would be assigned because of the rank, there'd be 2 new police officers there, and then we had the other part of this plan was 3 to 4 additional police officers. So I just want to be clear that what the council is directing us to do. I'm just a little bit confused.
Okay, because I'm looking at your memo dated yesterday to us. Down at the bottom, it talks about transferring costs around Seminole Theater, et cetera, brings approximately $450 to the general fund to cover the cost of 2 to 3. And then you're talking about the other cuts would cover 1. So you're talking about a total of 4 or 5 then, all right? Or no? Yeah.
I'm talking about if we separate out the body camera program, which includes 2 officers, we separate them out. So there's 2 officers there, and then with the additional cuts and the CRA and the Seminole Theater portion, that's a total of 3 to 4 police officers.
including the 2 new.
No, on top of the 2 for the camera program.
All right.
I think that's why I'm confused.
Let's forget about the camera system for a minute.
Let's forget the camera system, yes.
Forget about that.
Let's forget about that. The other
New
portion,
people in roll call due to everything anything other than body cam allocations would be 4.
maximum, yes, 4, that's correct. So the maximum number of new police officers, if it were 4, would be 6.
Okay. You know, I guess where I'm going is I don't want to be locked into 4 plus the 2. Let's see if it really should be 3 plus the 2.
Okay.
Once we really drill down into those numbers and take a look again at recurring versus non-recurring allocations. Again, under my concern that what if we do have to bail out of that system, we've still hired new people.
Understood.
For that system, yeah.
And if I may remind the mayor and council that we will come back to you with the agreement as soon as we can and have it vetted by our attorneys, because these numbers that were given to us by Axon were based on 2019 numbers, and this is in place until October 27th. So we will for sure have this back to you well before that.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from council?
I believe there was a motion in a second.
I think Councilwoman Avila spoke up first, and then I think it was Councilman Hawk.
Wait, Mayor, just for clarification, there was a motion in a second. We're still debating. I'm confused procedurally.
Well, procedurally, you're right. There's a motion in a second, and I was kind of looking for some clarity that we weren't locking ourselves in to that maximum number of new police officers above and beyond the officers with respect to the body cam system.
Right. You asked a clarifying question to the motion, which was fine, but it seems like we're going back into like debate or conversation. You asked, is there anything further? And I spoke and proffered a motion, but now we're going back into discussion. So I was confused procedurally.
Okay. Well then, I guess as the maker of the motion, I would look to you for your perspective on my concerns and where that might go as to how we count bodies.
Well, I think the language, it should say up to, because because it gives you that wiggle room to say, you know what, or up to. It gives you that wiggle room to be able to say, you know what, we can't do 4, let's do 3. So you have that latitude when you have the language broad like that as it relates to police officers. So I am okay with up to.
Okay, so let's look to the person who made the second and see if they are, I believe that was Councilwoman Bailey. Did you make the second?
I did, and that is okay with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we can have final discussion on that motion as clarified.
May I now?
Sure, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a few final comments before we vote. I'm encouraged to see the creativity behind the city staff's planning and trying to recalculate these numbers. Deferring the first year payment and spreading it over the cost of the final year was one of the suggestions that I made during the multiple conversations with them. So I'm glad to see that they're being creative and bringing these solutions, because we do need that type of creativity in the future on many other important topics as well. Also, I wanted to clarify my reasoning behind switching the earmark from specifically to cameras to public safety, because as the mayor reminded us, we have this racial equity and diversity action plan, which is extremely important. It's important to me, and it encompasses a variety of challenges that are facing our community. And so I wanted to make sure, and I wanted to ask now, are we going to be able to continue to earmark those funds for public safety, and can we also tag on their diversity action plan so that we can continue to use whatever's left over from forfeiture, continue to put into that pot so we can continue to work on that plan. And maybe that's a decision we make at the next meeting when we have the contract in front of us. But I would like for council to consider keeping that pot of money separated for that purpose so that we can continue to do the work that we're going to be bringing to our presentations and our discussions on Vice Mayor's agenda, which I think is so very important. And I also wanted to clarify where the shift in my support came from, because as we just heard now from Axon and from Captain DeJohn, there's specifications on the fact that there's an automatic trigger for when a weapon is pulled to start the recording. And that's what has been elaborated and been the focus of a lot of the conversation around the equipment and the mechanisms and the triggers in place for it. However, right before our last meeting, I was advised that the recordings would be for every single interaction that occurred with the citizens. And for me, that was a whole new playing field. And so the personal liberties and the privacies, invasions of privacies, and all those levels of discomfort that were coming from that new information is what put me into the position of wanting to see it on the ballot. And so I appreciate Councilwoman Bailey for bringing that up again, because it is important to me to still have that option in the future. But I am encouraged by everything that I'm hearing. And if we can ensure that through policy that we're very specific on when those recordings are happening, I would be a lot more comfortable with moving forward. And I would prefer a better financial plan on how to make sure that this is funded fully over the next 5 years. And for all the reasons that I've said in the past about the economy and what to expect in the years to come, and how we are going to be able to offset any future challenges. But I do want to step out on the foot of faith, as Vice Mayor is encouraging us to do, and I think these are all steps in the right direction. But what I'm hearing is that we are going to be able to hone down on policy to make sure that the recording is going to be specific, and if that's going to come to us for approval versus it being a police department decision, that would be more appropriate in my opinion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I think with respect to your question and staff, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Mayor.
Okay, because I got a text from someone on the meeting asking if I was still there, so I didn't know if I had faded out. Your question, Councilwoman, as I recall, and staff or attorneys jump in here, I think my recollection is that we allocated the recurring $400,000 a year, more or less, with respect to the Speedway for public safety. Is that correct, staff?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It is correct.
So, Councilwoman, does that address your concerns? Because, that 400,000 is, and in this plan is allocated totally toward the subject of our conversation today.
So would it be appropriate to ask the council to earmark it not just for public safety, but for the diversity action plan in general, which would include public safety, additional police officers, after-school programs, et cetera, all these things that we're going to be discussing in future meetings? Is that something we could do now to make that decision now, or at the next meeting?
Through the mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I don't think we should do that, because I was speaking with Kate last night, and I came up with some other avenues to be able to potentially fund some of the areas that may need to be funded with respect to the different areas that we're targeting. My area, education, won't need any funding, but I was thinking about the home ownership area. Currently in the CRA plan, there's $50,000 allocated. I don't think that's enough. We can potentially utilize some CRA funds to increase that pot. So I have some ideas for that. I don't think we have to do that here.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilwoman?
That's fine. I think I think having additional conversation in the future is going to be fine.
Thank you. Yeah, surprisingly, I would agree with the Vice Mayor, because additional officers in the body cam systems are part of those programs we've discussed, and led those conversations led by the Vice Mayor. So, in effect, we are funding components of that program by allocating these monies today, and so you get caught up in form over substance in order to do that. Vice Mayor, I'd make one note. I know we got word today that the county has approved some reimbursement to our CRA programs for the rental assistance and small business assistance that have already been spent. So potentially we believe there are monies coming back, and then once those are in hand, we can look at that to allocate to those programs that you just discussed that are very relevant.
Woohoo! Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Mayor, one last thing. Are we
Sure.
going to be able to see the policy with the contract?
Isn't that something that the police department would develop?
Hey, Mayor, the SOPs is what the police department develops.
For our approval.
Of course, along with the contract, we'll be in the process of developing a departmental policy on the use and storage of videos and the use of the camera itself. But those are two separate things. Normally, when we develop policy, SOPs, that is forwarded to the attorneys for approval to make sure the language in it is correct in accordance with state law and best practices for police department. And that's going to protect us liability-wise, but we normally do not present any SOPs or any type of policy before council on any matter. Since I've been here, I don't recall that ever happening. But we will provide, the policy, a copy of the policy, and any changes in the SOPs as a result of use of force or anything like that, that'll be forwarded to you. But it's not generally done for approval.
Right, and I believe the concern is those privacy issues that have been raised earlier, and what triggers the filming. Perhaps some one-on-one discussion with council members would be appropriate. I think we're getting tangled up between public records disclosure versus raw footage. And that may be where some of the disconnect and the concern lies at this point. My perception is that if we go forward, we get these cameras under contract, we get the systems here, we get the training done, but nothing really gets deployed until that policy is in place.
And Mayor, as the police department develops that policy, I'm certain that they will address the privacy concerns. And as you suggested, we will, of course, keep the council apprised.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Roth, I think you've been trying to be recognized.
Mayor, real quick.
Oh yes. Okay, sure.
I have to.
I'm sorry.
I've got a 4:30, so I've got to get ready to drop off this call. So in the event that the motion doesn't change and I can't make the vote, I do express voting in favor of the motion as it's currently made. If it gets amended, I'll have to get with the clerk later. But I just want to let you know I got to drop off here. I got to walk into my meeting.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do have just one comment, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Roth.
I just want some clarity on the CRA 450,000, the 49,000 that council has given up, and the 100,000 for overtime, so that we could hire 4 police officers and not 3 police officers. I think that they, unless I'm mistaken, the 450 was to go to pay for police officers as well.
Yes, with those dollars that you mentioned, Councilman, yes, we could hire up to 4 police officers, and that's in addition to the 2 police officers for the program. But you're correct. And
Correct. I understand the program is separate from that money. So if it's okay to change the motion to include up to four police officers outside of the body camera program, I think that, as the vice mayor has been saying all along, would be basically meeting in the middle. And I'd be very comfortable in doing that.
Vice Mayor, wasn't that the motion? Was that the clarification we discussed?
The motion is up to 4 because I believe Kate said 3, maybe 4 officers. So we put that up to be able to give us the latitude to determine what we can ultimately afford. So up to 4, I'm completely okay with that.
Right, and that is not inclusive of the officers that come with the body camera system, Councilman Ross.
That is correct.
Correct. Yes, I understand that. I thought I heard it as up to 3.
Now, we clarified it up to 4.
There. Good. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Fletcher.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I got back a couple minutes ago. Could someone just clarify what the current motion is? I'm sorry for my rudeness and having to leave the meeting earlier, but I'd like to know what we're voting on.
Mr. Attorney, are you there?
Yes, sir. The motion as it stands and it's been seconded was to direct staff to move forward with a plan as they proposed for up to 4 officers and the cameras. Everything would come, the contract for the cameras would come back to council for final approval, as well as not for approval, but with, for advice, on the procedures, the SOP for the implementation would also be provided to the council, was got folded into the discussion as well.
Okay, I think I should.
Mr. Pearl.
I apologize. I'm just a little confused now. How Matt reiterated that. I'm not sure if that was in addition to the camera program and the 2 police officers.
The 4 officers was I had interpreted it as being in addition to the 2 officers for the cameras.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all.
You up to speed, Councilman?
Yes, sir. I'm good to go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing further, then I'll close the discussion. And would any member of council wish to be recorded as a no vote as to this motion? Okay, then. It appears that we have a unanimous direction to staff to proceed upon those directives.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. We will get back to you as soon as we can with the terms of the contract. And thank you to Axel and Jeremy for being on the call. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Anything further?
Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Pearl?
No, sir.
I guess we'll need to be discussing the expiration of the ability to have remote meetings at some point. Assuming no orders signed between now and midnight.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Any further from council? Thank you all. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.